Bristol, UK, October 2023. Delegates gather for a 2-day conference of talks, workshops and networking. It's the culmination of 20 years of research by Malik Al Nasir into his ancestral links to slavery and colonialism, which have unearthed an epic story which will cause us to rethink what we thought we knew about Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade. At the heart of it are the archives of a single mercantile entity, Sandbach Tinne Co.
Welcome to the M Shed and to Bristol. It's really exciting to be able to come together physically to have a look at the Sandbach Tinne archive, to analyse it, understand it better, think about how we can collaborate to build upon this archive to reveal really important insights that we can take forward.
Malik's quest began with him investigating his personal roots in the sugarcane plantations of Demerara, Guyana.
If we are first cousins, then I'm your uncle. Okay, if I'm your uncle, then you have to give me respect, okay?
It's led to the discovery of a network of previously unexposed powerful families whose influence and wealth have shaped Britain and the world for over 200 years.
Most of the research that I've encountered when I've gone to conferences around slavery has been focused on abolition. We, as black academics, we don't want to really look at abolition, we want to look at slavery. And in order to do that, we need to open up these archives, we need to get these into the public domain, we need to be able to transcribe them, we need to be able to visualize, if you like, the historical narratives that emerge from these archives. And really what the Sandbach Tinne Project does is it gives us an opportunity to start that process through the lens of one family. And that family is Sandbach Tinne. Thank you.
The Sandbach Tinne family is Malik's own family, a surprising connection he only discovered as an adult. He was born in 1966 in Liverpool to a white Welsh mother and a black Guyanese father.
My father died when I was really young, so I didn't get to know my father and I didn't get to understand his culture beyond his death. And I grew up on a white council estate where I was surrounded by people who constantly just telling me to go back to where you came from. And I didn't know where that was. And having been in the care system from the age of 9, I was brought up to believe that I was no good, that I had no value, and that left me in a situation where I was constantly questioning my own existence, like, do I have a right to be here in this country, on this earth? And that began a series of questions that led me to want to research my ancestry.
At first, Malik had few skills to be able to undertake research.
When I left the care system at 18, I was semi-literate. I had no qualifications and they dumped me in a homeless hostel. They gave me £100 and left me there. And it was very fortunate that that year I actually met an artist and civil rights activist called Gil Scott Heron, who happened to be touring. We became friends. He took me on the road with his band.
The evening that I met the brother in Liverpool some 21 years ago, I was exactly where I needed to be. I needed to be in a place where I could meet someone and see someone who was a product of the environment. What he wanted, I believed, was an opportunity to demonstrate his worth. We told him, get on the bus. If you're looking for a job, you're looking for work, you're looking for an opportunity, you're looking for a chance, get on the bus and come with us.
And he encouraged me to study my history. He was like, you know, you need to study your history, but in order to do that, you need to become literate. And I painstakingly self-educated.
With Gil as a mentor, Malik completed undergraduate and postgraduate degrees at Liverpool's universities in subjects from geography and sociology to social research and media production. He is a published poet, author, and academic.
When you see someone take the opportunity, take the chance that you're offering them and run with it and become a full-fledged adult, an artist and a gentleman and a father, a husband, and a brother of peace and generosity, you see one of your dreams fulfilled.
In 2003, a BBC documentary about a black Victorian footballer proved a turning point in Malik's personal ancestral research.
There are some pivotal moments in your life where things change and you know that it's never going to be the same again. And the discovery of Andrew Watson definitely spelled that watershed moment for me.
Andrew Watson was born in Demerara, Guyana, grew up in the UK and captained the Scottish national football team. Over 100 years later, football historian Jed O'Brien unearthed his story.
More than 3 decades ago, I was sat in the boardroom at Queen's Park Football Club, and as I leafed through the unmatched photos, I came across one that changed my life. An 1880 photo of Queen's Park, all 11 Scots for that first international. There, standing at the back, was a black footballer. Now, I cannot understate the shock I felt, because I was looking at somebody who, in my self-confident ignorance, could not possibly exist.
He had the same family name as my father. My father was Reginald Watson. My grandfather was George Edward Watson. My name was Mark Watson. I became a Muslim and changed my name to Malik Al Nasir. So I'm looking at this guy with the same name, coming from the same place in Demerara, having all the same features as me, and thinking, is he related to me?
In 2008, armed with a few details from his father's old friends, Malik travelled to Demerara to look for anyone with the Scottish surname of Watson.
Life is a struggle fighter.
He found Witheleen, his 82-year-old first cousin, living next to the sugar plantation where his father had once cut cane as a youth.
So, what can you remember about George Edward Watson, your grandfather, our grandfather? What can you remember of him?
What I can remember of him?
Mm-hmm.
He was a sweet man, you know. I believe you take a part of him too.
You think so?
You see, today, I am a happy man today. This is the face of a happy man who came home and found his country and found his people and found his family. And you just bring tears to my eyes. I'm a happy man this day.
That's right.
Malik also found that he was indeed related to Andrew Watson, whose mother was a freed black woman and whose white father ran the colony's sugar concern for a company called Sandbach Tinne Co.
What started to emerge from that was this story, this epic story of this mercantile entity that at one point was practically running the British Empire, known as Sandbach Tinne. They owned shipping lines, they owned plantations, they had thousands of enslaved Africans on their plantations in Grenada, in Trinidad, and also in Demerara, and they were producing sugar, molasses, rum on an industrial scale. Samuel Sandbach was the mayor of Liverpool in 1831. His wife was the cousin to John Gladstone's wife, the mother of Prime Minister William Ewart Gladstone. And when Andrew Watson died, in his obituary, it's written, Andrew Watson, Gladstone's cousin.
The irony of the young child forced into care being related to one of Liverpool's most prominent dignitaries was not lost on Malik.
I'm now looking at this guy and going, if I'm connected to him, I'm also connected to these guys.
This is the most exciting research that's taking place into, I think, the most vital, the most disguised, the most disavowed, marginalised aspect of British history. And at the centre of it is somebody whose life story and family story is absolutely entangled and entwined in that history. This project could never have happened without Malik.
Central to the project is the study of archives. Thousands of letters, contracts, and deeds, holding untold stories of exploitation, ripe for research.
We've got academics from Glasgow, Liverpool, Bristol, Cambridge universities, also from universities in the US. We've got expert practitioners, people working in museums, people looking at archives, people actually exploring the legal aspects of access to information about our shared pasts.
On his return from Demerara, Malik resolved to tackle the huge amount of archival evidence left behind by Sandbach Tinne Co.
Of all the terrible things slavery did, one of the most powerful things it did was it take away people's sense of identity and belonging. But slavery did something else. It left behind a vast paperwork, a huge academic record.
There was collections here and collections there. You book a slot in a library, they give you an hour. They bring you a box of documents. It's 200-year-old. Some of the handwriting is poor. You might get through one document in an hour if you're lucky. And there were hundreds and thousands of these documents, and I was just like, I need access to this information. How do I get access to it?
Frustration drew Malik to the open market, notably a collection of 100 letters collected by stamp dealers but then sold as a job lot due to their unremarkable postmarks. Crucially for Malik's quest, they document in great detail the early years of Sandbach Tinne's involvement in the slave trade.
I maxed out my credit card, but it was like, I have to have these documents. And then I got them. And at that point, I was in a situation where I had my own archive. No one could tell me when I could look at it, when I couldn't look at it, what I could do with them, what I couldn't do with them. But I was like, I really need to get this archive digitized. And that was the beginning of what became the Sandbach Tinne Project.
You can never recover the lost identities, people who are descended from enslaved people, but we can at least find a way of using that vast body of knowledge to recover some connections, some sense of trajectory, if not a knowledge of exactly where people came from.
Based on the initial findings from his archive, Malik was invited to do a PhD at the University of Cambridge, but finance was a barrier. With the aim of crowdfunding, he wrote an article about his story for BBC Online. It was July 2020, the summer of the murder of George Floyd in the USA, the toppling of Colston's statue in Bristol, and Black Lives Matter across the globe. The article went viral, with over 1 million views in 24 hours. A week later, Malik was granted a full scholarship for his PhD. Once at Cambridge, Malik sought their help with digitizing his archive. Every document was photographed in high resolution and will soon be transcribed and indexed for easy access online.
What was unique about the way I conducted the research was that I did it through a genealogical lens. I was looking at one family, the family that enslaved my ancestors, okay? The family that I found myself having derived from as a descendant of both them and their slaves. So I followed that family history wherever it led me. And because I was looking at this through a family lens and not looking at it through a period or a subject, I saw a different picture.
The real value of the Sandbach Tinne research is that it does something critical to storytelling. It adds faces and names to what otherwise are thought of as big amorphous groups. It does that vital thing to people's engagement with history that makes it about people.
Inquiries into Malik's work snowballed. Hundreds of people and organisations contacted him about their connections to Sandbach Tinne. From Scottish Highland estate land ownership to the foundation of Liverpool subscription reading clubs and many other interested parties, now contributing to the conference.
I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here because I am always an only child. I'm always the only person where I've presented who have even heard of, I've realized now I've been pronouncing it wrong for at least a decade, Sandbach. Always said Sandbach. Sandbach. I always say very Americanized Sandbach Tinne, right?
In 1831, the Bristol West India Association received a copy of the Liverpool petition against the renewal of the Act for refining foreign sugars for exploitation, and the names Samuel Sandbach, Charles Stewart Parker, John Abraham Tinne, Henry Robertson Sandbach, and John Gladstone appear in the signatories.
We found that there had been 63 estate purchases by direct or indirect beneficiaries of slavery in the West Highlands and Islands. The majority of the purchases took place between 1790 and 1850, which was the main period of the Highland clearances. 1,114,000 or so acres. That acreage is around 1/3 of the total area of the West Highlands and Islands.
We're going to be building this digital map on which we will locate Andrew Watson's story. We got out 3 very super enlarged historic maps of Glasgow, one from the 1880s and then a couple of others from the early 1900s. And without us having to say anything, the community curators dove immediately and instinctively into the maps and began to locate themselves and their lives, their communities, their sporting experiences onto historic Glasgow.
The family really dominated the cultivation of culture in Liverpool. using the money accumulated through their vast and violent business portfolios to establish subscription libraries, newsrooms, Liverpool's Botanic Garden and day schools for the labouring classes.
Slavery and the compensation scheme upon abolition in 1833 funded philanthropy and signals of Victorian virtue.
We'll build infrastructure with the money and we will have them believe that we are philanthropists. And in that process, we will rebrand ourselves. And we won't call ourselves slave traders, we'll call ourselves West Indian merchants. And when people call our name, they'll call our name because we're on the street name. They'll call our name because we have a statue in the middle of the boulevard. They'll call our name because we provided the public utility, this school maybe, or this church that they use. And they'll soon forget where the money came from because they're enjoying the beneficial interest of that money.
I was part of the steering group that produced the colonial legacies of the Liverpool Sandbach family on display at the Walker. The sculptures that we interpreted were artworks by John Gibson. So the first one was the monument to Margaret Sandbach. Margaret was a poet. She was the granddaughter of abolitionist William Roscoe and was the wife of Henry Robertson Sandbach.
I think it's really important that we can start talking about where the wealth came from to purchase, acquire and commission these works, but also we can start bringing in communities, open discussions and dialogue around these kind of histories. And I think it's really important just to acknowledge that, yeah, Liverpool is built on slavery and its wealth, and hopefully this kind of project can push that forward.
In addition to public works and art, slavery money poured into the foundation of academic institutions, including all three of Liverpool's leading universities.
Our universities and the precursor organisations of our universities were the engine rooms of the ideas of racial hierarchies, the stereotypes, the beliefs that still shape our society. It is this infrastructure of knowledge production left behind by colonialism and slavery that I think has a very specific duty to recognise its origin stories, recognise the damage that the ideas that they generated did and are still doing, and to be at the forefront of restitution.
Newnham College was Cambridge University's first college for women. It is investigating its foundational links to slavery, including the Sandbach Tinne family legacy.
In 2021, we spent 3 weeks in Newnham College's archives. We were researching the Cambridge College's legacies of enslavement.
To sum up our methodology, we prioritise finding links to friends, families and business partners as the foundations of our connections to slavery. This placed social networks at the centre of our approach.
We were thusly able to capture both the far-reaching impact of enslavement and also rich biographical details of the people entangled in its legacies, both enslaved and free.
The graphics show the number of donors who helped fund Newnham College and their links with each other. The next stage was to add their related enslaved people to the database, but there were so many that the system could barely cope.
Even though the enslaved dominate our map in these sort of dark sunflowers at the edge, they are a tiny fraction of all the enslaved people connected to Newnham College.
We're going to have questions from the floor, but I wondered if...
As well as the talks, panel sessions allow questions from fellow academics and public alike.
In terms of The Guardian, which was based in Manchester, I'm curious, did you notice any of the societies in Liverpool, if there was an overlap with elite Manchester men being part of those societies?
So yeah, there's so much overlap between Liverpool institutions and Manchester institutions. So the Haywoods are really key, and they're all called Arthur and Benjamin, and it gets very confusing. But there's a Haywoods Bank in Liverpool, but there's also a Manchester branch, and the Haywoods are related through marriage to the Gladstones, and the Gladstones are also involved in institutions in Manchester.
Day one ends with a networking reception. Guests of honour are Professor Evelyn Welch, Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of Bristol, and Professor David Olusoga, a leading historian in the field. There's a sense of optimism and celebration, mixed with reminders of the remaining challenges.
I think what you're doing today, you've created stories which are both fascinating, exciting, intriguing, but also deeply, deeply disturbing. The University of Bristol itself is tracing its own disturbing contacts and connections. And as the Vice-Chancellor, I hope that we never cushion ourselves against the histories that we have to own up to and that we have to acknowledge.
While some descendants of slavery and slaveholders are joining universities, companies, corporations and charities in engaging in research and engaging in forms of restorative justice, others are engaged in the opposite. They are seeking refuge from historical facts, and they are seeking allies in the culture war, in those who would monster the study of slavery and those who would silence historians and stifle scholarship. We need to recognize that we are in the crosshairs of an attack that has only really been seen and really been witnessed by those who study the climate. Above all, we need to support one another, perhaps more than ever before. Thank you very much.
After the public showcase of Day 1, Day 2 of the conference is a private gathering of Pro-Vice Chancellors, museum directors, librarians and curators to plot the next phase of the project.
Welcome to Bristol Digital Futures Institute and our lovely new 200-year-old retort house and coal shed, one of the oldest standing buildings of its kind left in the country, which we've converted into this amazing 21st century Digital Futures Research Institute. This is the first building that's been developed for the new Temple Quarter Enterprise Campus.
We're now talking about what's next. What do we do with all this excitement and all this knowledge? How do we make that knowledge available? How do we tell the stories from that and make it actionable and think about the impact that this kind of research can have?
It's a great pleasure to
The day is divided into lectures and a series of themed workshops. Topics include technology, institutional engagement, and equality, diversity and inclusion. The framework has been devised by ThinkLab, who Malik came across while doing his PhD at the University of Cambridge.
I like to describe ThinkLab as a bit of a research startup. We work with a partner organization to kind of tackle big picture challenges, and we bring together very interdisciplinary groups of research students from all over to see what we can do. Every project is a little bit different. Sometimes it's tech, sometimes it's with museums, libraries, community engagement, and sometimes it's about historical research.
Over the course of a year, ThinkLab assessed other Sandbach Tinne archives in institutions across the UK and ran joint projects with them and Malik. They also proposed a governance framework and began to devise an ambitious plan for growth of the Sandbach Tinne Project as a whole. The workshops play a key role in this.
The thing with a lot of conferences is that there's always fantastic presentations and discussions and talks, but often it stays sort of in the realm of the theoretical. And we're trying to do things a little bit differently. We're almost giving ourselves homework and saying, right, this is what needs to happen next.
What I'd like to do with the Sandbach Tinne Project is really unite these collections, whether they come from the cultural sector, museums, galleries, libraries, or whether they're in the academic realm within universities and institutes of learning, to have them all digitized so that they can be democratized. The information can be just made available and accessible to the public, to anybody, anywhere in the world, at any time that wants to get access to them.
You can take a digital archive from the US and one from Bristol and one from Glasgow, put it all in one place for scholars, for school children, for society to engage with. But then what you can do is you can bring that archive alive once it's digitized. You can develop immersive technologies, and you can do that in a way that's really compelling.
But technological wizardry can only go so far. Underpinning everything is the desire to implement real change in the way scholarship is done. Not just for the study of Sandbach Tinne, but for all areas of slavery and colonial history.
We have to show the warts and all truth of what happened if we're ever going to learn any lessons from it. So there has to be a reckoning with that past. Black people are the least represented, they are the least funded, they are the least present within the archive sector, within the museum sector. We need to change that. We need to have people from the victim group be represented in the curatorial teams, in the archives, making the decisions. What this programme is going to do is develop a positive action doctoral training partnership which will allow Black British and Black Caribbean academics to be funded to conduct this research and for them to be embedded in these cultural institutions and academic institutions where these collections are held. And then we aim to provide some sort of pastoral care and support around that to enable them to be able to feel comfortable within that environment and to be able to conduct that research.
As we think about this as a university, we think about how we open up our archives and tell the stories of the founding of the university, but also how we work with local communities to help them to rediscover their family stories, their histories, also to open up the university as a place that is welcoming to and that isn't complicit in the silencing of Black voices, of local Black communities. So it's a really massive project for us. We're right at the beginning of that process in Liverpool.
In terms of end result and public offer, I think there's huge potential. There is opportunity for a big touring exhibition, a permanent display in lots of different museums, and the digital possibilities seem endless to me. That way in which we can connect different collections together so that the public can research them in a way that is holistic and makes sense, I think is a huge opportunity.
The idea of the Sandbach Tinne Project has gone from a concept into something now which seems like it's about to galvanise into something quite tangible, and that's really important.
I suspect that in 10 years' time, we'll look back at the study of slavery and try to remember what it was like before we'd heard of the Sandbach Tinne dynasty. That we'll struggle to imagine how we try to understand Britain's involvement in slavery and the slave trade without this huge dynastic epic at the centre of it.